for about 2,000 years, 1,600 to 2,000 years, and it's all leading up to this time of Genesis chapter 6. And no, it's not leading up to that and stopping. It will go on beyond that, but from our perspective this morning, it leads us up to Genesis chapter 6. Just how bad can a culture get in 2,000 years? Let me ask it another way. How long has it been since 1950? Y'all can do the math. This is 2025. 1950 would have been what? About 200 years ago? No, it's 275, that's right. Y'all do the better math than I do. 75 years. Those of you who are around and old enough to understand anything in 1950, how has the culture, our culture in which we live, changed in that 75 years? Very slowly, just how much? Rapidly. How have we changed? In what way has it gone? Backward. 1950, some of you who were there, I wasn't there. What was 1950 like? Sinlessly perfect? Everything wonderful? You didn't have to lock your car. You didn't have to lock your doors. You could walk out. You know, I'm still bad about that. I don't lock my doors when I walk out. My wife still fusses at me about that. But I figure way up here in the mountains, who's going to rob you? And what have I got to steal? But anyway, that's another story. Sir? Profanity was not something that you did. People did it, but as Cliff said, it was appalling. People were... Now, if somebody uses profanity, what's your reaction? I mean, we bring it into our homes on television. I mean, in the 50s, I guess it was the 50s, when did Gone with the Wind come out? A long time ago. They had that one word. Can you imagine a 2-hour movie, or however long it is, movie today with only one cuss word? I mean, it's just unimaginable today that we can do that. But like Cliff said, back then it was appalling. Today it's just accepted part of culture. How else has the world changed in 75 years? I would think, Janice says, most people in some way believed in God in the 1950s. There was a respect for Christianity, a respect for faith. Even if you didn't go to church, most folks went to church, some reluctantly, but still they went to church. But there wasn't a disrespect or a disdain for faith. Today, not in every case, but in a lot of cases, in that 75-year span, the respect for Christianity or respect for faith has gone which direction? Well, it's not a good place in which we are. So let's just imagine 75 years times whatever it makes to come 1,600, 2,000 years. That many years, 2,000 years of going from the Garden of Eden, where it was sinlessly perfect, to the time before the flood, or of the flood. Yes, ma'am. Just a minute, Cliff. Okay, different kinds of sins over the years. Back then, sins were, if we covered them, I would think is a way that we did. We weren't a sinless people in 1950, but we didn't just come out right and get in your face with it. And today, it's more, maybe a different kind of sin, like she said, but it's more of an in-your-face kind of sinfulness that is present in our lives. Cliff?
Grew by leaps and bounds because of that. The other thing that I
We don't read today anything much, especially the Bible. That's right. So things have changed quite a bit. And my point was not so much to label the kinds of sins or the sins that we are involved in today, but just to, on a high level perspective, see how the world has changed. Now, I agree with Holly that there are certain sins back then that were more prevalent than there are today, and there are certain sins that are more prevalent today than there were back then. But I think overall we can see that there is a digression in spirituality from 75 years ago, and let's multiply that times 10 to see what it was from the time of Adam to the time of Noah. There was light in the time of Noah, or during those centuries that intervened between Adam and Noah. How do we know that? When I say light, spiritual enlightenment, how do we know that there was light in those times? We see a terrible situation in Genesis chapter 6, dark situation in Genesis chapter 6, but between Genesis chapter 3 and Genesis chapter 6, was it just all evil and all darkness? How do we know? Enoch was a man who walked with God. He's in the genealogy of Noah, and he was a man who walked with God. When you do the math, and all the grandparents of Enoch, and including Adam, when they were still alive, how do you have a man in the midst of those generations about whom it said, like Enoch, that he walked with God and he was so perfect in his ways that God took him? What kind of person was Enoch? Looking at the age thing here, when Enoch was alive, I got a thing I can do this with. Here's Enoch here. Look at Adam. He starts here at 0, and it goes all the way up to 900 years. When Adam was 900 years, Enoch was, I guess, he lived to be 365, so he was in his dying days when Adam was dying. So Adam and Enoch lived at the same time. And same thing with Seth. Seth outlived Enoch several years, but if you look at the chart there, Enoch and Seth were living during the same time. Was Enoch walking with God? I don't know. The Bible doesn't say. It just says that he lived and died and had kids. But with Enoch, it said he lived, he died, had kids, but he walked with God. What does that tell us? Can we gain anything from this chart that tells us who lived with whom during that time? Anything? Say it again. Yeah, there was you could see a difference. There was light. That's the thing I wanted to see, that even though by the time we get to Genesis chapter 6, it is the epitome of darkness, there was, and we don't know how much, we have this one example of Enoch, but how did Enoch learn to walk the way of God? Did he just come to him? No, I think he was trained in some way. I think he and Adam lived at the same time. I don't know if in the same place, but Adam surely had some input into Enoch's life. He was his grandkid, great-great-great-grandkid, and so maybe he told him something about God. Little bits and pieces, maybe big bits and pieces of God passed down through the generations, and Enoch got it, and he chose to walk with God. Most of the others didn't, and you can see that in Genesis chapter 6. My guess is that there was a huge decline, a sharp decline in walking with God after Enoch died. It was going down gradually until the time of Enoch, but after Enoch, I think it took a sharp decline. What can we learn about ourselves today based upon that thinking, if it's correct? If we're bad today, what's it going to be like in 100 years? If something doesn't happen, what's it going to be like in 100 years? What's it going to be like in 1,500 years? Amen to that. I think that's the point I want us to get here. Because this can and will happen if we don't share the message of God with our children. If we just allow the world to raise them, the world's going to raise them in, when we're using the terms light and darkness, how's the world going to raise them? According to light? No. Back in the 50s, what were we teaching our kids in school? That's changed somewhat, at least here in the country. I don't know about in the city so much, but that's changed somewhat. But in the 50s, we were teaching our kids or allowing our kids to be taught that they came from apes. I don't know what they teach them today, but I don't think theism is taught, but maybe not that is being taught. I don't know. But it's important that we spend this time together in the assembly teaching our children about God, but not just here. How much time do we get here with our kids? We have a Bible class going on now, so there's an hour, 45 minutes. We have a Bible class on Wednesday evening. There's an hour or 45 minutes that's specifically directed toward the kids. 2 hours compared to what they're fixing to start school, next week, a week or two? How much time are they going to have access with the school, the community, the darkness that prevails in this world? How much time are they going to have access to our kids' minds compared to the 2 hours that we get? It's important. If we get nothing else from Noah and Enoch, it's important that we teach our kids the ways of God. Because if we don't teach them, they won't learn it. They can't get it. David?
I'm reminded, Matt, of Matthew, the 7th chapter, where it says, "Straight is the way and narrow is the gate, and few there be which go in thereat." We have always been in the minority.
That's right.
We have to live with that. But that should strengthen our faith, really. But that's what
We can't, it's so true that, what Jesus said, that few are going to find it, but we can't allow that be the excuse that says, well, we're not going to make it anyway, so we'll just let the kids get what they want or what they can get. We need to make every effort. What does Paul say in 2 Timothy 2, verse 15? Be diligent. Be diligent in studying the Word and applying the Word. And he teaches us in Ephesians, to raise our children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Folks, if we don't do it, it won't get done. It wasn't happening very well in the time between Adam and Noah. And the result is the world became so corrupt that man couldn't live in it and survive, spiritually speaking. So God did something, and we'll talk about that. The story of the flood is really about when spiritual darkness becomes so great that it's no longer possible for people of faith to survive in that world. They can still walk in light, but what's going to happen in a world like Noah's? What's going to happen in a day filled with violence? What's going to happen to people who walk according to light? Well, they're going to be persecuted. They're going to die. They're going to be, violence will be against them. Later on in Genesis, you'll read about Sodom and Gomorrah. What happened in Sodom and Gomorrah? I don't need specific details. It was destroyed by God. Why? What happened between Abraham and God on the hill outside of Sodom and Gomorrah? God came down, he had a meal with Abraham. He says, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, the 5 cities actually of the plain. And there was a conversation that took place between God and Abraham. What was that conversation? There was a negotiation. God says, I'm going to do it. And Abraham says, if I can find, I forget the number where they started, 50 was it? If I can find 50, will you spare it? Yeah, I'll spare it for 50. What does that tell you? God's going to destroy. He knows he's going to destroy, so God knows what? There's not 50 people in Sodom, the plain, walking in light. They're all filled with the darkness that prevailed at the time. And in the negotiation, it went down to, was it 10? For 10 righteous souls, would you save it? There weren't 10. God did, what's the word? Acquiesce is not the word I want, but he did concede, and he sent angels down there to pull out Lot and his wife and his daughters and sons-in-law. I guess that number did not add up to 10, and it was -1 when they came out. Why? Lot's wife, she It's a sin to turn around, right? No. It was a sin to anxiously want what God was about to destroy. Her heart was filled with the darkness, and she wanted to keep that more than she wanted to walk with God. So ever how many the number was that came out of Sodom, it was -1 because she still wanted Sodom. She wanted what God was going to destroy. Later on in Scripture, you'll find the destruction of Jerusalem. Why was it destroyed? It was so vile, so violent, so far away from God and light that saints couldn't live or walk in light within it. It's possible in the midst of deep darkness like we're talking about in Genesis 6 and in Sodom and Gomorrah and in Jerusalem's destruction, it's possible to walk in light in that darkness, but the possibility of surviving is limited because violence against the people of God. And I think, and probably don't have enough time to discuss this, but I think that's what we see in Revelation 20. We know absolutely that God is going to come in judgment one day, yes? We call it the day of judgment. We call it the day of Christ's coming, second coming. Why is God coming in judgment? Well, let me ask it another way. When is God coming in judgment? We don't know because the Bible doesn't give us, it specifically says that we don't know when he's coming. There will be no sign of his coming. But I want you to look in Revelation 20, in verse 7 beginning. It says, "Now when the 1,000 years have expired," we don't have time to go into all that, but 1,000 years in the book of Revelation is not a literal number. Don't think 1,000 years. Think of a metaphor used for the time of Christ's reign. Christ's reign is described in another place as being 1,000 years. And at the end of that 1,000 years, at the end of the time of Christ's reign, Satan will be released from his prison, will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the breadth of the earth, surrounded. What did they do? When an enemy surrounds their enemy, what's their purpose? We're going to go in and have a party. We're going to go in and celebrate with them. Is that what we're going to do? When the enemy has surrounded the saints, what is the anticipation of what's going to happen? What do we know is going to happen there? They're going to destroy. Okay, so it says they went up on the breadth of the earth. They surrounded the camp of the saints, the beloved city, and fire came down from heaven and devoured them. I think this speaks of the end time. When will it be? I don't know. What will be the sign of it happening? Well, I don't think there's any specific sign that we can look for other than the world will be in such a state of darkness that people of light can't survive anymore. And God will come and take his people home. And destruction will come upon the darkness or the wicked. That's as I understand Revelation 20. It will be a horrible world in which to live. And I think that's the world in which Noah lived. It was so bad at Noah's time, during Noah's time, that people of faith could no longer survive the evil in which they lived. So God says, I'll put an end to it. I'll destroy it. And that's what he did. In the days before Noah, the way of God was being passed down, I think, but barely. And that's how Enoch and his grandson, great-grandson actually, Noah, came to be in favor with God. It appears that Enoch and Adam, according to the chart, they died about the same time, and Noah knew really neither of them, but Seth was still alive when Noah was born. We don't know, other than what we learn of Enoch, what was the spiritual status of Noah's ancestors. Were they faithful? I don't know. Did they walk with God? Well, Enoch did. We know that about him. But when Adam sinned and was cast out of the garden, how did he live his life the next 900 years? Well, I don't know. I want to think that because of the relationship that he had with God, there was still some light in him. He, of course, is disappointed that he's cast out of the garden, but he had the promise of God that there's something that will happen in the future that will fix that. So I want to hope that Adam lived according to light. But then there's Cain. Where did Cain learn to be like that? Now, this is not happening in 2 or 3 days. We're talking several years. I don't remember how old. Well, Adam was pretty young, because even though he looked old when he had Seth, but there were brothers and sisters. I don't know how many that there were. So Cain's influence was not only from Adam and Eve. Cain's influence was from those who were living around him, which would be his brothers and sisters. But where does Cain get the nature that he thinks because he's jealous of his brother, he can kill his brother? Where does that come from? Not pointing fingers at Adam and Eve, but it seems like things really went south after the Garden of Eden. And I don't want to judge them too harshly, because 50 years ago or 75 years ago, we were sinful people, but we weren't like we are today. And that's the way that Noah and his ancestors grew up. How deep was the darkness? Well, we'll see that in Genesis chapter 6. So what happened? Who can tell me the story very briefly of Noah, what we know in Genesis chapter 6? Okay, he had 3 sons. I'll give you a start. Their names were Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and one of those is the one through whom Christ came. Anybody know? Which one? No, it wasn't Japheth. We came from Japheth, I think. Shem. We use the term Semitic today. Semitic comes from the word Shem, or from the name Shem. We are or Christ was from the Shemites, which would be the people of Shem. Ham was, well, the word I thought was interesting. In Russia, the name Ham means rude. So Ham was, based upon the story, pretty rude, or even maybe beyond rude. And one of the things that describes Noah's time is the violence that was there. What does the Bible say about God's perception of how things were in Noah's day? The thoughts, every thought, the Bible says, and every imagination of the hearts and thoughts of men were evil. How much? Continually. Now you think about that. Not just a thought was evil, but every thought, every imagination of the heart of men was evil, and continually so. What kind of culture is that? Who wants to live there? We live in a bad culture today, but I don't think we're that far, are we? There's a lot of thoughts that are evil, a lot of hearts that are evil, and a lot of them are evil a lot of the time. But I don't think we can say of our generation that every thought and every imagination of the heart was evil continually. When you say evil continually, every thought, every imagination of the heart is evil continually, what do you think that produces? How is that lived out? If you have something I want, and I'm bigger than you and can take it, what am I going to do? I'm going to take it. Now you apply that to every aspect of our lives. How safe were women in the streets? If I'm bigger than you are and you have something I want, I'm going to take it. Now, I'm not going to ask you to let your imaginations go there, but that's the way it was. It was an evil place. It was a hard place to live. If you wanted to walk according to the will of God, it was a hard place to live. So God says, I'm going to bring an end to humanity. Why? Well, not to humanity, but to the world of that time. Why was he going to do this? Say it again. It grieved him in his heart. This is not something God took pleasure in. It grieved him in his heart that he was sorry that he made man. Why? Did he make a mistake? No, it wasn't that. It was man is destroying himself. And if I let it go on, there won't be 6 or 8 righteous souls that can be saved. So God is sorry that he's made man because of what man was doing to himself. They were putting themselves into a situation that they cannot be salvaged. And God had told Adam, one day there's going to come one who's going to destroy the power of Satan. Well, that's not yet in Genesis chapter 6, but evil is so prevalent, God had to do something. So he washed the world, so to speak. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. So God was planning on washing the world, purging, as Holly said, the leaven. So what did God ask Noah to do? Noah found favor in the eyes of God, it said, and God asked Noah to do something. Build an ark. And what are we going to do with this ark? Well, we're going to bring all the animals, representations of all the animals into the world, and those who would come to the light would come into the ark. And Noah spent how many years preaching? From y'all's reading this week, how many years was it? Wasn't it like 200 years? Long time. We're told over in Peter, I think, how long he was preaching, and how many responses did he get? A couple elephants, a couple giraffes, a couple monkeys, but no one from the world. That's how the world was. How many responses do we get to the gospel today? It's still happening. I mean, we're not pulling in boatloads of people, but it's still happening today that people are touched with the message of the gospel. So we need to be out there teaching the gospel. But there'll come a day when we can teach and teach and teach and teach, and they won't hear. And I think God will do what God does when that time comes. He's going to protect his saints. And that's what he's doing here. He's protecting the saints. They built an ark out of what? Gopher wood. Getting ahead of myself in my notes here. I told you I'm not very good at following the book. He says in Genesis chapter 9, verse 5, surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning from the hand of every beast. I will require it from the hand of every man, from the hand of man's brother. I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds the man's blood, by his blood shall he, by man his blood shall be shed. I can't read either. For in the image of God he has made men. Spilling of blood. How do you understand that? Murder. Killing of innocent people. How is that done? Who was it that took an axe with 40 whacks and killed the mother? Lizzie Borden. So you can do it with an axe. How else can you do it? You can take a gun, shoot somebody. You can take a bomb and blow up somebody. I heard it, but I didn't hear it. You can take a plastic knife and hijack a plane. The Bible tells us that the shedding of innocent blood is something that truly revolts God. And in Genesis chapter 6 is evidence of that, but you don't have to take a knife in hand or a bomb in hand to shed innocent blood. The Bible will teach us that you can shed innocent blood simply by neglecting your fellow man. In the book of Amos, I think it's the book of Amos, that God spoke to the people, and he says, because you have neglected the poor, you have neglected the widow, you have neglected the fatherless, you have neglected the stranger, you have brought about their death. So simply by neglecting to take care of your fellow man, we can shed innocent blood. And I wanted to think about that for a moment, that God did not accept the worship of the people during the time of Amos because they were neglecting those whom they should have been helping. And that neglect brought about those peoples, the weak, the fatherless, and so forth, brought about their deaths or their destruction. We have a responsibility to each other, don't we? It's not just not shooting someone. It's not just not throwing a bomb at someone. It's don't neglect. Neglecting those who are not able to take care of themselves, that's a violence done against your fellow man. What is pure religion, according to James? And undefiled? Y'all know this verse. I don't even have to put it on the screen. Yeah, taking care, visiting the widows and the fatherless in their affliction. What does it mean to visit? Go by and knock on the door and say, hey, what does it mean to visit? Tend to them, care for them. Don't neglect those who you have ability to help. And if we do neglect, not only is it not pure religion, but we'll be held accountable for it. If the Old Testament is any example whatsoever, we're accountable if we refuse to take care of them. In day 2 of your studies, if I remember, what did you get from that? What's the idea presented in day 2 of your studies in your book? We got one. Is that the second bell already? Y'all ringing 2 bells at once now? The difference between Noah's generation Noah and the generation that in which he lived, she says, or the author says, there's 2 authors there, they say, is the bend of their hearts. What kind of heart did Noah have, and what kind of heart did the people of his day have? We already heard about the heart of the people of this day. They were evil continually. What was Noah? He walked with God. I mean, that's what it says. He walked with God. He found favor in the eyes of God. Only one man in all the world, 2,000 years of population. How much is that going to be? Well, can't say for sure, but I think the world was pretty populated at the time. And every intent of every heart was evil continually except for Noah. And it says, as we already mentioned, that God was sorry that he had made man and was grieved in his heart. Grief. What does that feel like? A time for a party? What is grief? It hurts. It's sorrow. It's pain. In the way that we typically use it, pain of loss. God has lost something. He wants fellowship with God or with humans, and he lost it. Paul says in Romans chapter 8, verse 31, what shall we say to these things? The things he's talking about there, the fact that God has called us to him, God has justified us, God has glorified us. What shall we say to this? Well, we can say if God is for us, what? Who can be against us? That's true, right? Recognizing the teaching of the gospel and what God has done for us. If God is for us, who can be against us? Who is this God? Well, he's the one who did not spare his own son. He's the one who delivered him up for us. How will this same God not also freely give us all things? If he'll give you that much, what else will he give you? All things, Paul says. Who shall bring a charge against God's elect? It's not God. God justifies. Who is he who condemns? He says it's surely not Christ, for Christ died and is risen and is at the right hand of God so that he might make intercession for us. God's not on the cloud with a lightning bolt in his hand waiting to zap us. God wants to justify us. Jesus makes intercession for us. But we do have an enemy. God is our Father. He's caring for us, but we do have an enemy. And It's Satan. And when Satan turns that one from God, it hurts. I hope you don't know the answer to this question, but how do you feel when one of your children chooses to walk in a way different than what you've taught them? It hurts. To the bone of your soul, it hurts. Humanity walked away from God. Humanity created in His image walked away from God. How does God feel? And I hope the next time you're tempted to sin, you'll think about that illustration, how you feel or would feel if your children walked in a different way than what you've taught them. And that's how God feels. If you give in to that temptation, that's how God feels. It hurts. He grieves in his heart. Noah walked with God. And the pleasure that God received from that is as great as the pain that he received from the grief. But Noah walked with God. Well, we only got to day 2. I wanted to get days 3 and 4. What we're not going to do as we study this book is continue the lesson until next week. We're done with Noah. We'll go to Abraham next week. It's my tendency to want to continue the lesson until next week if I don't get finished. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just the book, and so next week we'll be looking at Abraham. So do the Bible studies this week, and we'll come together next week and talk about Abraham. Thank you, sir.